Well, this weekend's Lake Superior Day celebration also marks a milestone for UMD's Large Lakes Observatory. The research of the LLO is conducted all around the world, but they have done the most science on our Great Lake. They are the only institute on the planet doing research on large freshwater lakes. Joining us now is Bob Sterner, director of the Large Lakes Observatory and biology professor at UMD. And Liz Miner is a professor of chemistry and biochemistry with the Large Lakes Observatory. Thank you both for being here. Bob, maybe we can start with you. Tell us about the research that has been done, specifically maybe in Lake Superior by this vessel and by the observatory.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
So the Large Lakes Observatory is a dozen UMD faculty, and we all have our specialties. And one of the things that sets us apart as an institution is the interdisciplinary aspect of what we do. So a typical research project from LLO will pull in a biologist and a geologist and a chemist or some combination of things. We all have expertise in large lakes work, but we also have our own specialties. So work on the Blue Heron runs the gamut of living organisms from microbes to fish. It's performed all over the lake. We have scientists who are understanding the sort of basic hydrodynamics of how water works and how that affects lake organisms and how climate change is affecting the structure of the water column. We have chemists like Liz who are looking at the chemical substances in the water. So it's a wide diversity of topics.
Sounds that way.
And all over the lake.
Let's talk about some of your specific projects that you're working on.
Well, we have worked mainly on Lake Superior right now, but we have also worked, I just wanted to mention, in Lake Malawi as well. So that makes an interesting comparison.
It does.
A large tropical lake versus a large temperate one. And my recent work has kind of had two prongs. One is looking at what effect plumes coming from storm events have on the lake itself, in terms of introducing nutrients and changing primary production, how much algal growth there is, those sorts of things. And then the other sort of came about by accident. I like to look at carbon species in the water. And when I was working in Lake Malawi, I was perplexed because the carbon samples weren't acting the way they should. And when I looked at them under a microscope, they were actually microplastics rather than the natural organic matter I thought I was measuring. And so one of the prongs of research that we have now is looking at microplastics in lake water, lake sediments, and in the beaches around them, trying to figure out what their chemical composition is and where they might be coming from, and hopefully understanding their fate.
Liz, is there something in particular you're looking for in Lake Superior? And maybe a follow-up, is Lake Superior a pretty clean lake?
Lake Superior is a pretty clean lake compared to where I came from. So I cut my teeth doing water chemistry in the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, okay.
And Lake Superior is a lovely, lovely system compared to some of the places in the Chesapeake Bay. It has stressors, but it also has very concerned people around its watershed trying to make sure that the stressors don't become serious problems.
And that's your job.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Bob, how do you define large lakes?
Oh, great question.
And why is it important to study them?
Well, I like to tell people that large lakes isn't a box that we live in at LLO, but it defines our soul. So one of the things that sets us apart compared to other lake research units around the country is that we work on large lakes.
Yeah.
And the larger, the more interesting is another way to put it. That's not just a kind of a sales pitch, because working on large lakes requires perspectives and techniques and infrastructure that's similar to working on oceans. And so there are many aquatic research units around the country. Many of them work on lakes, but we uniquely have the sort of 1 foot in oceanography, with working in teams on ships and large equipment and things like this, and another foot in the freshwater systems, typically smaller lakes that people work on doing lake biology. So our scientists are stretched pretty widely because we have to be able to communicate to and relate our work to an oceanographic community as well as a lake community.
Liz, tell us about the Blue Heron and who's on board.
Well, I will do that, but I also wanted to just follow
Yeah.
up a little on Bob's discussion
Sure.
and say, to give you an idea of the sampling variation and the talking variation, one day we might be pulling on hip waders and grabbing samples from the side of the shore on a small lake, and the next day we're on the Blue Heron, about 25, 30 kilometers offshore, grabbing water samples. The Blue Heron has room for 11 people doing 24-hour work, and of that, 7 of them are usually involved in scientific efforts, and we are tag teaming, collecting water, collecting mud, working around the clock whenever we arrive at a place. It's an interesting experience, but it's a lot of fun.
What's some of the specialized equipment that you have on board that helps you in your work?
Well, my personal favorite is the CTD, which is a great big rosette with a bunch of sampling sensors that are on the bottom of it. And the rosette is a set of water bottles that
And
have
CTD
spring-loaded
stands
caps.
for?
Conductivity, temperature, depth. So
Okay.
it's named for the sensors at the bottom.
Okay.
And we send this thing down and we look at what the water looks like as as this whole package moves through the water column. And when we hit a patch of water that's interesting, we say, aha, let's grab a sample. And we send a signal down the wire, close one of the bottles on the rosette, bring the water up, and then do chemistry on it.
No, I asked you about the health of Lake Superior. What's the health of our water supply worldwide? Are we in danger?
Many people say we are. There are people who say water is the most precious substance on Earth. I like to joke that I'm also fond of oxygen, so I'm not sure that water is the most precious substance. But there's a lot of interesting things to say about that. For example, there are a lot of international conflicts around the world about water, and we share our vast Great Lakes resources with another country, of course. And if you look globally, the countries who have good political and social cooperation around water are countries that are at peace with each other. And it goes hand in hand. When there's disagreements about water, you have countries that don't get along real well. So global water issues there's a vast field there. There certainly are places in the world where water supply is more acute and less than what the social systems around there need. Even in Minnesota, we have some small places. If we were doing this show around White Bear Lake, we would be very familiar with the low lake levels and what that did to the community. There are communities in Minnesota pumping groundwater where the water supply is not ample. So water stress happens in a very heterogeneous way, certain places, small or large. We are very blessed here in the Twin Ports with 10% of Earth's surface liquid fresh water right outside our door.
And of course, you're celebrating the 25th anniversary. Are there some special events that you have planned that people can take part in to learn more about the Large Lakes Observatory?
There certainly are. For the first time ever, we're doing an open house at LLO. So Sunday afternoon from 4 to 7 p.m., we're inviting anyone who wants to come to visit us. We're next to the Old Main Park in Duluth. And starting at 4, we have outdoor activities, games for the kids. We'll be grilling hot dogs, and so people can stop by for dinner if they want. And we also will have our building open for that whole period of time, 4 to 7. And anyone who wishes to can come, enter the building. Several of the research labs will be open, so you can walk into the actual research labs. We'll have displays and activities in the hallways for all ages. So we're hoping we'll have a great turnout.
And with that, we are out of time. Bob, Liz, thank you both so very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.